of attendees at the moment. Is that correct, Laura?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I'm not sure if she's attending tonight, but we'll just kind of move forward and see if we can get her on.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Orr? I'm hearing nothing there. Mr. Plumpy?
Yes, this is Joseph Plumpy. I am here in Fairfax Station, Virginia. I'm a resident. I hear everybody loud and clear. Thank you. And with Kermit.
Yes. Mr. Zellman?
This is Jason Zellman. I'm at my home in Burke, Virginia, and I hear everyone just fine.
And I should note my name again is John Burns, chair of the ARB, and I am reporting to you from my home in the future historic overlay district of Holland Hills. So at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the vice chairman. Mr. Daniel said I may be heard to make the requisite motion. Mr. Daniel, can you take the floor, please?
All right, I look to see if there are any motions.
Yeah. Is there a second?
John, could you repeat the motion again? And Chris, I think I muted you by accident. My apologies.
That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, John, if you could repeat.
I move that each member's voice is adequately heard by each other member of this ARB.
Do we have a second?
I second it. Joe Plumpy.
Seconded by Mr. Plumpy. All right. All those in favor respond with saying aye.
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 Hold on, I gotta unmute everybody. Sorry. Sorry. All right.
All right.
My apologies.
We're ready.
Okay. Oh,
Watkins is here.
Susan's here. Okay.
My shiny head with white hair.
Would you like us to vote?
Yes, please vote.
Yes.
I vote aye.
The table saying that all members can be heard. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? No responses. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That gavel back.
Second motion is quorum of the ARB members as determined by the roll call. Are we at 9 or 8, Laura?
We are at 9, but we need to confirm that Susan is here and she can speak. Ms. Watkins is here and she can speak and hear everyone.
Okay. So, as determined by the roll call, 9 members of the ARB present, therefore satisfies the ARB quorum minimum. The ARB bylaws state that a minimum of 6 members are required to determine a quorum. I move that we have a quorum of ARB members in this meeting.
Look for a second.
I'll second that.
All right, second by Mr. Kalinsky. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, this is the third of the draft motions, of the emergency motions. This is need for an electronic meeting. Having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access for the meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this ARB to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the ARB in the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the ARB may conduct this meeting electronically through WebEx, a county virtual meeting platform, and available for access through the ARB county website or through phone at 1-408-418-9388 with the access code 129336 8432. It is so moved.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Notkins. All those in favor, respond with a statement of aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fourth of the emergency motions, the need to dispense with FOIA's usual procedures to assure continuity in government and continue operations. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of this board's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Second.
We have a second. I was not sure by who, though.
Me.
Jason Zellman.
Jason Zellman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None, the motion passes.
Okay, this is the fifth of the emergency motions on public comments. The ARB needs to determine how long each member of the public will be able to speak during the public comment periods. The public will be allowed to comment after the consent agenda items and after each action item, as is standard ARB practice. I move that each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak.
We have a motion. Second?
I'll second that. Stephen Kalinsky.
All right, we have a second from Mr. Kalinsky. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Okay, we are now officially called to order then. I assume as chair.
John, I hand back over the gavel to you to take.
The electronic gavel.
Yes,
Thank you,
the
sir.
electronic gavel is yours.
The first item of business that we traditionally open each meeting with is a reading of the statement of purpose and intent of historic overlay districts. And tonight, Mr. Zellman has graciously agreed to read that for us.
Historic overlay districts are created for the purpose of promoting the general welfare, education, economic prosperity, and recreational pleasure of the public through the perpetuation of those general areas or individual structures and premises that have been officially designated by the Board of Supervisors as having historical, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance. Regulations within such districts are intended to protect against destruction of or encroachment upon such areas, structures, and premises, to encourage uses which will lead to their continuance, conservation, and improvement in a manner appropriate to the preservation of the cultural, social, economic, political, architectural, or archaeological heritage of the county, to prevent creation of environmental influences adverse to such purposes, and to assure that new structures and uses within such districts will be keeping with the character to be preserved and enhanced.
Thank you, Mr. Zellman. First order of business then will be the approval of the agenda. I understand that we have a motion. I will make a motion that we approve the agenda with 2 changes. That is the consent items numbers 4 for the Thompson House and consent item number 5 for new signage for a hotel at 8849 Richmond Highway be moved to action items.
John, I second that motion, Mr. Daniel.
So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Okay. We have an agenda. Laura, did anyone identify themselves as a guest to be introduced tonight?
No, but I'd like to go through roll call of our attendees real quick, if you would all indulge me.
Please do that.
Just so we can make sure while we have our IT folks here, if anyone needs to have some help, we'll get through that. So hold on one second. Okay, I'm going to go through, if I can, and see if people can hear me. So if I call your name, I'm going to unmute you and then mute you back up. But I just want to make sure that we have people, everyone can hear. So bear with me for 1 second. All right, the first one, Mr. Wayne Cotter. Can you hear us? Can you speak, please? Not hear him. Okay. Tori Bowers, are you there? Hold on 1 second. Can you all, if you're available, there's something you can raise your hand on the bottom of the screen, and you might not have to go through the entire roll call. And this is not for the A or B members, but this is for all the attendees. If you could raise your hand so that you know we can talk to you and hear you, that would be great. And then your little hand is on the right side of your screen under under the participants. A couple people finding it. One or two more minutes. Mr. Lambert, can you hear us? Or are you able to speak? There we go. Mr. Cotter, are you able to hear us or to speak or to raise your hand? We have Todd and Patricia Ruffini, Mr. Michael Kazek, Mr. Mark Dicio, thank you. Mr. John McConnell, Mr. Aaron Vinson, and Mr. Lonnie Harvey. Okay, we have a majority of people with their hand raised. Thank you very much. I'm not going to go through one by one. I think it might take a little long, but hopefully we'll be able to get. I'm going to try one more person just to make sure. Mr. Jabori, can you speak? Nicole, are you able to try to get anyone to speak? Because I want to make sure one person works before we leave.
I'm looking to see, but I don't see where, I don't have the ability to unmute people right now.
Okay. So everyone is on, this might be our IT people.
Hi, Laura. It's Amante.
Hi, Amante.
Yeah, so what you can do is you can click on the all attendees and
Okay.
it will show on the attendee screen.
Okay.
And then you
Better.
can highlight their name,
Okay.
right click on their name and then unmute if you want an attendee to speak up.
So all I have is allow. I don't have an unmute. Allow to join teleconference. Is that?
They're probably just dialed in as a just telephone only. Try a different attendee.
Mr. Perry, can you hear us or speak? The only person I have, Mr. Jabori. Mr. Jabori, can you hear us and speak? He's the only one that I have the opportunity to unmute.
Laura, can you pass the role of host over to Amante?
Sure. Thank you all for bearing with us. Okay, Amante, just pass it over to you.
Host, not you pass
Oh,
presenter.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There
you go.
Okay, I'm now the host. Let me pull up the attendees. Which attendee name do you want to unmute?
I was just thinking any of them. I wasn't able to get any of them unmuted.
Okay. So I'll try, let me see here. Let's try Mr. Wayne Carter. I'm going to. Oh, it looks like he should be able to speak. Wayne, can you hear us?
Do people also need to unmute themselves?
They need to, yes.
It doesn't show up that they're muted though in the little box though. They can hear us because they're raising their hands.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Maybe it's the speaker.
They said the button labeled connect to audio is grayed out and you can't click on it when they're trying to connect.
Let's see here, unmute. Sharing.
Laura, I just wanted to make sure you could hear me.
Is this Kira?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
I can also just make them a panelist.
Yeah, I mean, that's one option. It could be that when you scheduled the event, you didn't allow attendees to participate at all. But let me do this. What we can do is we can make them a panelist. So let's make Mr. Wayne. Okay,
I can hear you, and can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Excellent.
Can everybody hear Mr. Wayne?
Yes.
Yes.
So we'll just update them or upgrade them to panelists if we need them to speak.
Yes. You can bring them back as a attendee if needed.
Okay. So if you have questions, please raise your hand or type in the chat box to the right, and you should be able to hear. And then we'll, as your item comes up for presentation, we will unmute you that way.
I'm muting Wayne now.
Okay.
And I'll pass the host role back to you, Laura.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let's see, change role to host. And you should be in control now.
All right, great. Thank you, Monte. All right, we're learning as we go along. So at least there's a way around it. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so a couple house rules before we move on. I want to let everyone know, I wish this was the beginning, but we are recording this meeting. That will be part of our FOIA requirements, and it will be posted online within 10 days. I want to just make sure that's out there. If you have any questions, once again, please put it in the chat box or the Q&A. Most likely the chat box is the best one, but we have somebody monitoring that, so they will let us know if there are any questions or anything coming. So let's go ahead and make sure that's all I had. I think that's all I had. So John, if you want to go forward with the we did the agenda approval. I don't know if we have any guests. I'm pretty sure from the list I saw, I didn't see anybody. If everyone could put their hands down, you have to click back on the hand raise function to do that. And then just let us know if you have questions, or if you're a member of the public that's attending, just type the questions in the chat box and we'll make sure your question or comments get heard. Okay, John, if you want to go ahead with the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and thank everyone for their patience. Please remember that we're very dependent on the ability to hear each other's voice clearly. So please, wherever your microphone may be, please do speak into it when you speak. First order of business then will be the consent calendar action items. And there are 3 projects in that consent calendar. They are ARB 20-LOR02, proposed structural modifications to the Workhouse Arts Center in Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse area. The second one is ARB 16-LOR03, amendment to the proposed Workhouse Arts Center access road, modifications and additional street lighting. And the third one is ARB 20-CTV01, proposal for replacement of signage located at 5652 Pickwick Road in Centerville. These 3 things are on a consent calendar, and because of that, we can consider them without formal presentation from the applicants, and we can also consider and make a motion on them as a single block. So I would entertain a motion for these 3 consent items.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daniel.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB recommend approval of the following consent items as submitted for the June 11th, 2020 ARB meeting. ARB 20-LOR02, ARB 16-LOR03 amendment, ARB 20-CTV01. Upon review of the materials and proposals, they are found to meet the requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zellman. Any further, no need for discussion on this one. I will call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. At this point, then, we will end the consent to action items tonight. The first one being the ARB 20 EAS01 proposal for a garage addition to the Thompson House located at 12500 Thompson Road, Fairfax, tax map number 035-1, lot 73. We understand that Todd and Patricia Rossini, the owners of the Thompson House, represent the application. This is in the Sully district. Mr. and Mrs. Rossini, are you able to hear us and make your presentation?
John, give me 1 second. I'm going to make the people the panelists on this application. Hold on 1 second. So I'm going to make Miss Liz Lee, making you a panelist. And Mrs. Rossini.
I might note while you're doing that, Laura, that the this proposal was reviewed in a virtual workshop setting last month in lieu of a normal ARB meeting. And so we are familiar with the project.
So Mr. and Mrs. Rossini and Miss Lee, I have you both now are panelists. I don't know if they have a presentation. Miss Lee, can you hear us and or comment? She's muted. Let me unmute her.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, this is Liz. I am representing my clients, Todd and Patricia Rossini, the owners of the Thompson House. We took the comments from the board members from your workshop, and we had made revisions by lowering the ceiling heights on the inside so that the overall structure height is lowered. And we had also stepped back the garage addition so that the original house is more of a prominent building that you see as you come down the driveway. And then another board member had also mentioned the windows of the new structures. We had gone back and replicated the same style and number of windows that are on the existing house into our new addition area to make it more of a consistent look on the outside.
And this is Nicole. I have access to all the things that were submitted. So if there's anything anybody would like to see or show, just let me know and I can share my screen for everybody.
I assume that was Ms. Lee who was speaking. Nicole, can you put up the revised drawings, the ones that would be different from what we saw in May?
Yes, give me 1 second. Okay, you should be able to see them, and just let me know if there's pages you want me to scroll to or things you want me to zoom in on.
Okay, well, before we move into questions from members of the board, is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this particular presentation? I think you need to alert Laura by raising your hand in the little hand symbol at the bottom of the participant list. Give you a second to try and do that.
I have Denise Dressel with their hand raised, and I'm sure she doesn't mean it. And I also have Mr. Mark Dicio with his hand raised.
Mark
and I'm
Dicio.
not sure if he has a comment, but if they do have a comment, please put it in the chat, and we'll be sure to hit it.
As of right now, there are no comments in the chat
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Kara.
or Q&A.
Okay, then I will ask members of the board for questions or comments on this particular presentation.
And John, if I can make a recommendation that you just go through each member of the board and see if they have comments, so we don't have multiple people.
Okay, we'll just scroll through the list of folks here. Let me go up to the top of the participant list.
I can do it if you'd like.
Okay, no, I just needed to get to the top of the picture. Mr. Daniel, questions or comments?
Certainly. So I unmuted myself. I appreciate the fact that the applicant has stepped back the design. That was one of my concerns when I saw it in the workshop session, is that it felt a little too cohesive in the sense that the garage felt right up front and center next to everything. And so walking that back is helpful, as well as lowering the height of the overall roof. So I definitely think from my perspective, there's been a minimization of the scale going on with this addition that I was concerned about when I saw previously. But that's all the comments I have at this current moment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Daniel. Ms. Murray?
No comments.
No comments from Ms. Murray. Mr. Zellman?
No comments.
No comments. Mr. Plumpy?
No comment.
No comment, okay. Ms. Aubrey?
Can you hear me? I do want to just thank the applicant for submitting the archaeological survey form. And we have had confirmation from the Fairfax County Park Authority that there's no need to do any further archaeological survey work on the property. There's nothing of significance that is thought to be there.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Aubrey. And who's next? Ms. Huang? You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay. No comments.
Okay, Ms. Notkins?
Appears to be in the same plane of the additions. Does it actually, I guess it does, it actually turns on the original house. You see what I'm saying? I can't tell the perspective.
Ms. Notkins.
Are you looking at a particular drawing?
I'm looking at the picture. I don't have all the drawings, I don't think.
Okay, Nicole, can you scroll through the drawings?
I'm looking at,
Yes, just let me know if you want me to zoom in on anything or keep going.
And Miss, could you repeat your initial question? Because I think you were on mute at the beginning of your question.
and I need to get back to the perspectives or perspective or whatever. And I'm currently looking at floor plans. So Nicole, can we move us backwards? Oh, all right.
Want that one?
That's a front view or a side view?
The top says proposed front elevation and the bottom one says proposed rear elevation.
All right, now I understand. There was a piece missing on that other drawing. Well, I don't have any comments. It looks interesting.
Okay, let's see. Did I miss anyone? Because I've got mixed in with my list of, Mr. Klinsky, there you are.
All right, can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you for the applicant for resubmitting and addressing some of these issues. It's a rather large addition, and you know, 3-car garage tends to do that to any house, and is a real challenge to design around. I think lowering the roof heights, having a single-story connector between the historic house and the new portion is very helpful. Pushing it back has also helped. A couple of small issues that I would suggest to the applicant that they may want to look to address. And Nicole, if you could, can you scroll back to the other set of elevations aside? One more. Okay, thank you. The proposed side elevation, which is on the bottom of the screen, kind of difficult with 3 garage doors to accomplish that composition there. I think there are some things that are very helpful. One of them is reducing the 3rd bay to a 1-story instead of a 2-story piece. I would think that if you were to actually stretch that bay a little wider so that the garage door doesn't look like it's forced into the left jamb of the 2-story portion, I think it may have a more successful elevation. The bay or the dormer, which projects up through the roof in the living room area at the front of the house, or I'm sorry, at the above the garage doors, those 3 windows, the relationship of the windows to the edge of the bay seem a little precarious. I would think it would be more successful if you were able to move all 3 windows closer to the center. In other words, give yourself some meat or some additional strength of wall to the right and to the left of the 2 outermost windows. And currently they look a little off balance. One looks much closer to the edge than the other. So I think some attention to detail there may be very helpful in making this work better and be more attractive. The small porch to the left of the 3 garage doors, it appears to be very tall with that little canopy roof that projects across. I would recommend that you do something to bring the some wall or a soffit down above that. I think it would give you more of a sense of shelter, and it would also not look so spindly as it attaches or as it goes up underneath that roof. And the final item, very minor, on the upper proposed side elevation, there's a 4/4 window that's to the right of a 2/2 window. I don't know if there's a reason why that window differs from the rest of the windows on the house. Perhaps it was just missed in the the new composition of the elevations. But if there isn't a good reason to have a 4/4 next to a 2/2, I'd recommend that you would have it match the rest of the windows. Those are my comments.
Mr. Klinsky, could you confirm which 2 windows you're talking about, which elevation?
Okay, so it's the proposed side elevation and it's the uppermost on the sheet, the top one on the sheet. And I'm
It's
talking
the
about,
4/4.
yeah, Nicole's indicating them
Yes.
Yeah.
with the bright arrow, yes.
Right. Okay. No, not those. The next, that's the lower elevation of the two there.
There you go. Nicole has the purple arrow pointing it. It's in the dormer of the new addition. The window that opens into the bathroom is a 4/4, and the window that opens into the kitchen area is a 2/2.
I got you. I see. Okay. I'm just observing that in the existing house, there is a 4/4 in the attic gable in the elevation drawing directly below that.
Okay.
That's why I was a little confused as to which one you were talking about. Yeah, the red dot there.
Okay, gotcha. Understood.
Okay.
I apologize. There was an oversight on my end to change the window grill. It should be the 2/2 to match the rest of the house.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
Yes.
you.
And, both the homeowners and I agree on your suggestions about the centering the garage door on the third bay and then bringing in the 3 windows closer together. And then we'll put some sort of a soffit or a header above right underneath the little roof by the porch.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you were to do that, you would find this to be a bit more of a balanced elevation and more pleasing. So I encourage you to do so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. I would offer some comments of mine. And Nicole, could you put up drawing 3 of that set of 8?
Yes. My up or down? Oh, there we go.
There you go, that one. My concern with this project, which I stated back in May, kind of remains. It was the size of the footprint of this addition in relation to the rest of the house. I think that it's not quite overwhelming, but pretty close to it. I agree that the changes that you made to the vertical measurements of the addition helped to reduce its visual imposition against the historic house. But I'm still concerned that this is a very large addition on a modestly sized house.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Notkins.
I would agree with you. And although it's sort of charming because you don't know it's an addition, there's absolutely nothing to tell you that it's not as old as the original house. And I thought that we were trying to, I mean, the public when looking at something isn't as sophisticated as the architects and who can see the clues that it is an addition. I'm not even sure there's clues because all the windows match, all the siding matches, I assume all the color matches. It's just, the only thing that doesn't match is the overwhelming size. I don't know what they do about this with it that I think that it is confusing as an addition to a very small house.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Notkins. I believe that's everyone on the.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Mr. Daniel, did I miss you?
No, you did not miss me, but I'd like to suggest, based on Mr. Kalinsky's comments and the applicant's indication of willingness to do those changes, that they be made a part of any potential motion to approve, because I think they are extremely valuable suggestions being made to lend some consistency in identifying some areas in the design. So rather than just recommendations, I think contingent on approval, we add them to the motion.
Okay. Having anyone else?
Change.
Hearing none, I will ask, would anyone like to make a motion on this particular action item?
All right. Mr. Burns, I'd be willing to attempt to make a motion here.
Mr. Kalinsky, please go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve ARB 20-EAS-01 located at 12,500 Thompson Road, Fairfax, tax map number 2022-10073 in an easement that requires a ARB review for the proposal to construct the construction of a new 3-car garage addition and a new room to connect to the existing house as submitted and as agreed to with the applicant at this meeting on June 11th, 2020, with the following conditions. And that the applicant adjust the proposed side elevation that contains the 3 garage doors to either center the garage door on the right-hand side within the 1-story element, or slightly enlarge it for that to be done. To provide some sort of soffit over the porch to the left of the 3 garage doors. And to restudy or change the composition of the 3 windows on the dormer above to move them closer together and further off of the edges of the dormer wall. Also, the proposed side elevation with the dormer on the back of the garage, that the 4/4 window be changed to a 2/2 window.
Second from Mr. Daniel.
Okay. May I make a friendly suggestion that we need to add at the end of that? Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet the requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
Yes, agreed.
Does that need to say that because it's not in an overlay district?
I'm just reading the draft motions. Laura, can you clarify that for us?
They were complying with a condition on a property.
That's why they're drafts, but yes, you're correct, Chris, or Mr. Daniel, that we do not need to put that, and it's found to meet the, just say requirements of the zoning ordinance, and that should meet it.
Okay, that be the case, I would draw the friendly amendment.
And then do we want to put anything in about the differentiation of materials or anything like that?
Laura, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, the differentiation of materials between the existing historic house and the new garage, if that's a concern.
That was noted in their presentation, I believe, right?
I thought that was a question from Ms. Notkin.
Well, the question from Mrs. Notkins really was that the size overwhelms the existing house.
Okay.
But perhaps the additional room, the connector room, could be made more transparent. In other words, I can't really read the drawing to see what they've done with it. Maybe I have to look at the plan. Let me see if I can find a plan. Could you put of the front, no, of the 2 sides, please?
Yeah. You want the
first floor plan will do.
Oh, just the plan
or the elevations of the 2 sides.
of the sides. Okay. There you go. Oh, sorry. I paused my sharing. Didn't I? There you go.
Yeah. Okay. The sides too.
I believe you're asking for sheet 5 of 8.
Which one?
That's the one that shows the low connect. There you go.
That's one low connector. This is, there it is. So it has a metal roof. And everything else is shingled, or I don't know what the black is. Black top. It's a fabric roof.
That is also shingle roof, I believe, just on our elevation because of the pitch that's at the CAD system somehow made that roof a little bit darker.
I see. All right. So you made that separation. And on the other side, and what color's the house?
The house is currently white vinyl Dutch lap siding, and it currently has green shingled roofing already.
Really?
Mhm.
So you're going to use green shingled roofing on the addition?
Correct. And then the metal roof will also be a green color as well.
If you put up sheet 1, you can see the
Get all
rendering.
these greens together.
John, Mr. Chairman, all of these, we are in an active motion right now.
Excuse me?
We are in an active motion right now.
I understand that. I was about to ask Ms. Notkins, are you proposing a friendly amendment?
Well, now that I come to understand it better, no.
No. Okay. Okay. Well, the motion then will stand as presented with 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that correct, Mr. Kalinsky? 4 conditions?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. We have a motion on the floor that includes 4 conditions for approval. I will call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All against the motion, say nay. I'll say nay. Note the chair votes nay. The motion carries.
Mrs. Notkins abstains.
Okay. Note, please, 1 nay, 1 abstention, and the other votes were all for the affirmative. We already have all that?
Yes, I'm all set.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay. The next action item
I need more time.
is amendment to ARB 18-WDL-02. Proposed new signage for the hotel located at 8849 Richmond Highway, tax map number 109-2, double paren 2, lots 11 and 12, located in the Woodlawn Historic Overlay District. This is in the Mount Vernon District, and Mr. John McConnell of the Belvoir Development Group and Affordable Suites of America will represent the proposal. Mr. McConnell, can you please join us if they can unmute you, please?
Mr. McConnell, I just promoted you to a panelist. And I have unmuted you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me back. You may recall that 2 years ago in July of 2018, you folks approved our hotel project at 8849 Richmond Highway. The reason for me coming back in front of you at this time, I will tell you that our project is almost complete. We should be finished within the next 60 days. And so we're very excited about that. The building, as you approved, is really looking great. So I'm very excited about that. The reason I'm in front of you today is because in January of 2019, the Affordable Suites Corporation was purchased by another entity. And since then, they have introduced a new brand that is still in the extended stay space of the hotel hospitality industry, but is basically a new brand that's called Stay APT Suites. Hopefully you all received the logo and the new design signage. I'm not asking you to do anything other than to consider that instead of the building sign saying Affordable Suites of America and the monument sign saying the same, it will simply be replaced by Stay APT Suites. Sizing has not changed. The building sign is actually channel letters instead of an actual sign face. But and you may also have seen, if maybe hopefully Laura may have provided this for you. She reached out to Bruce Miller with zoning property maintenance to confirm sizing and so forth. And his comments came back in that we were certainly in meeting those requirements. And so the only change that we're seeking here is a change in what the name on the sign. Our business model remains the same. Our building design hasn't been changed at all. And so I would ask that you go ahead and give us the go ahead to put these letters up instead of the others.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, could you scroll through the drawings?
Yeah, just let me know
Mr.
if you want.
McConnell, is there anything you want to say as she does that? You can ask her to scroll forward or backward if you want.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Mr. Burns. Pay no attention to the building you see in that first slide. That's a rendering of a future APT suite. It has nothing to do with our building. The logo there would be the same. So you can go to the next slide, Nicole.
Oops, sorry, 1 second. Can't do two things at once, apparently.
You can see on the right there, the original affordable suites sign was to be placed over this large window on the front of the building. It will now just have the APT suites. That's the only difference there. And then you can go to the next one. I think it'll show maybe a cross section. Yes, you can see the cross section there of the sign itself and the specs on the sizing and so forth. And then I think the last one or the next one will show the monument sign. No, that's actually the elevation, which is the original elevation that you folks approved. On the original one, it had an Affordable Suites logo. This is the APT. And then on the next slide, it just shows the monument sign. And this and the sizing on this monument sign. Actually, there, as you might remember, there is a monument sign now on premises. It happens to be in what now has become the VDOT right of way. We're working with VDOT to towards a solution to that. But this would be the once we're able to determine where the sign may be placed, that's what it would look like. And again, if you recall, the original monument sign was the same size as Affordable Suites of America. So basically, all we're asking here is just to show our new name.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McConnell. I appreciate you running this through the slide presentation. And Nicole, thank you for running through it for us. Before we go on to members of the board, is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this application? If so, please do so by using the right raise your hand symbol at the lower right corner of the participant list. I see none. Is that correct, Nicole?
I don't see any.
Can't see the hands when I'm sharing my screen.
At this time,
Okay. Yeah, Kira's watching it.
this time there are no typed questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I will double check the attendees' hands. At this time, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Question. This time I'm going to be a little more systematic about going through because I went back to the roll call. So I'm going to do it alphabetically like we did the roll call, and I'll call all members alphabetically by last name. So Ms. Aubrey?
I have no comment to make. Thank you.
Mr. Daniel?
I have no comments on the sign on the structure. The monument sign, if I remember correctly, was on a brick base in the past. And if I remember correctly, this new building is brick in base, and the monument sign you're showing is a blue base. I'm assuming that's partially due to the brand coloring But I wanted to make sure, I was wondering why we weren't going with brick to match the building for the base of the monument sign instead of using this blue material in the proposal note.
And great observation there, Mr. Daniel. You might recall there is a monument sign on site now, and that could be the monument, and it's concrete, that could be painted. It needs repainting, and that we could place the top part of that sign on right now without having to do anything else. And it may only be a temporary solution depending on what VDOT tells me. When I first met with you folks, Fairfax County still had that, was responsible for that space, and that's changed since then. And so we're having to deal with some different things. Certainly, and I agree that if we, I don't particularly care for that either, to be honest with you. So particularly since our building is brick and hardy board. So we will paint the existing concrete monument that's there without changing its size at all. And that would be our main focus going forward.
So this is the blue base right here is the existing base you're going to put the sign on.
No, it is not. That would actually be made by the sign company, and it is actually a different material. It's a fiberglass or a metal of some sort. That wouldn't be used.
I know. I think I got lost there. So I'm trying to understand what the optional monument sign is. That actually something we're voting on and approving on? And
you already approved a monument sign. We're just approving the change to stay APT suites instead of affordable suites.
Okay. And so Laura, if I remember from the package, we approved a monument sign on the brick base previously, right? Or is that a different?
No, that's correct. I think if we just want to say, we could do something in the motion of, notwithstanding the monument sign shall be mounted on a brick foundation or something like that. I think that would be appropriate.
Pardon me for interrupting. I don't recall, and I could be wrong here, seeing anything in our final approval requiring a brick monument, but I could be wrong. Laura, do you have that? Because I'm looking at the approval letter. It may be somewhere else.
Nicole, could you put up sheet 5 of 7 on the file marked ARB sign approval stamp paren 1?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Don. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
There.
That one?
Right. The caption that I can read there says affordable suites outdoor freestanding sign 8 by 4 feet on brick monument. Proposed same type of sign at 8849 Richmond Highway on 6-foot high brick monument.
Got it. You're right. I've got it right here in front of me. Thank you, Mr. Burns, Mr. Daniel. You're right. So brick it is.
Okay. So, all right. So then where the current proposal has a blue base with 1001 written on it, that would then become brick?
Correct.
To match the brick of the hotel. Okay.
That's what I would prefer, so we have some consistency with the building. That would be my preference.
That makes immense sense. Okay, thank you, Mr.
May I ask
Daniel.
this, Mr. Daniel, would if we can find a way to put a brick facing on the existing concrete that's there, would that be acceptable?
From my perspective, yes. If we can replicate the look of brick, I'm fine with that too.
Okay, because it's very difficult to tear something down, start over again, particularly with the limited space we have. So I would appreciate that, but okay, very good.
Okay, I will continue then to go through the roll call of the ARB members. Ms. Wong?
Yeah, I do still try to pass out because I just look at the map. And yes, there are existing sign there already, and the bottom is concrete. So if without taking that sign, in order to put the brick sign, it will have to increase the footprint of the monument sign. And I'm not quite sure. In terms of zoning regulation, they have a very specific sign size requirement, stuff like that.
Okay, I believe that then would need to be worked out with Mr. McConnell and the company and the Fairfax County sign ordinance folks. But I think what Mr. McDaniel was getting, suggesting might be able to happen is you could put a thin veneer brick. I think there's one product called Z brick. It's just maybe a half-inch thick. In lieu of full depth brick, and that would be only a minimal increase in the base of the sign. That may be acceptable to the county, but that's not our responsibility. That's something that Mr. McConnell would have to take up with the county. Thank you. Mr. Kalinsky.
Yes, if we're going to go with the Z brick, I'm going to recommend that the color of the brick either should match the base of the brick on the building.
Agreed.
In other words, if it's a brown brick, then we need a very close match brown brick as opposed to orange, red, etc.
Sure. Agreed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. Ms. Murray?
No comment.
No comment. Ms. Notkins?
I probably have to unmute her. Hold on. Nicole, do you see her on the panelist list anymore?
Let me look.
She does not appear either.
No, I think she must have popped off.
I don't see her on the list. Okay, well then, Ms. Ora was also not here. Mr. Plumpy?
No comment.
Okay, and Mr. Zellman?
No comment.
Okay, so we have heard from several members who offered suggestions. The fundamental suggestion was that the base should be brick, paralleling what was approved in 2018, and that a thin brick matching the color of the brick on the new building would be most appropriate. Mr. McConnell, I seem to remember that you said that you were amenable to those changes. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, and I will then entertain a motion on this particular action item.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve ARB-18 WDL-02 amendment for new signage for hotel located at 8849 Richmond Highway, tax map number 109-2 double paren 2, 11 and 12 located in the Woodlawn Historic Overlay District for the revision to approved building mounted sign and monument sign as submitted and presented at the June 11, 2020 ARB meeting, subject to the following conditions: that the monument sign, the base of the monument sign include a thin brick veneer on it in similar color and fashion to the building to match. Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet the requirements of zoning ordinance 7-200 historic overlay districts.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Mr. Kalinsky. Any further discussion?
Mr. Burns, this is Mr. McConnell again. Excuse me for interrupting. I'd like to make sure that we are actually, the action being taken here is for the sign to go on the building and the monument sign.
Yes, sir. Both are included. The condition applies solely to the monument sign.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe the motion I read should approve building mounted signage and monument sign, correct?
Thank you.
Okay, is the seconder okay with that clarification?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay, we're good. Okay. Now with that clarification, I will ask the question, call the question. All in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get you all invited to our grand opening. Take care. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that ends the action item agenda. We will now move into items in workshop session. And the first one of these is ARB 18-LFK-06, amendment, proposal for architectural modifications to the existing Mackerel House located at 1011 and 1013 Turkey Run Road. Tax map 22-3, double paren 1, lots 1551, located in the Langley Fork Historic Overlay District. And this is in the Drainsville District, and Mr. Jabouri is going to present this tonight. While we're getting him unmuted, I will note that this was shared with us in a workshop session back in May, a virtual workshop session, and so we are familiar with the proposal. From that time, we made suggestions and comments, and Mr. Jabouri has responded to those. So, Mr. Jabouri, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Very nice seeing everybody during the conditions. Make this very short and
excuse me 1 second. Nicole, when people come up, can you put up their presentation, please?
Yeah, I was just waiting to see which one he wanted because there's multiple things.
Okay, right. Mr. Majori, we can make the presentation show up on everyone's screen. You tell us what you want and then move to the next or whatever it is you'd like. We can follow and you can follow along with us.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman. I just about to mention that I am going to pass this presentation to Mr. Nottingham of Anderson Cooper Group Architects, who has done the work. So I'm just going to bow out and let Mr. Nottingham to follow through, answer any questions, because this is all their work, if you don't mind.
Okay, that would be fine.
Thank you very much. Addison, are you available? Can we unmute him?
Hello, good evening. Hello.
Mr. Nottingham, are you there?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. Good evening, board. We took on the project with Mr. Al-Jabouri in relationship to the McCall House. And at that point, they had already received approvals for the demolition portion up to the part of the house that was the original house that's part of the historic report compiled by the county for the property. What we are in the application is seeking to do is maintain that portion that's subject property in the historic report by the county, and effectively repair the damage that was done to it when it was kind of added to and kind of collected in a whole series of other additions to the other house over time. We had received some comments, and as you say, from the previous workshop, we had addressed those. We have a series of exhibits. So the first slide that you're looking at there is the oldest known photograph of the property from, I believe, 1918. And if you'll notice, it does show a front porch, which we are proposing to add back to the property. If you want to go to the next slide. So we went out and we documented the existing house. So these are all the existings. So you can go to the next slide. And this will show the portions of the house that we're actually removing. As you can see, it's pretty light on what we're removing. The report really talks about an L-shaped home, and that's pretty much what we're keeping. On the, I guess, the north side, we added the north arrow, which was one of our comments. We've taken off the kind of sunken brick patio to put back the porch, similar to the front porch, the wooden front porch that was original to the house from the photograph. If you go Also, a little demolition area on the south side, which was kind of an added-on kitchen, kind of ad hoc, I'm not sure what it was, bathroom in the house as it was before the demo work started. Go to the next page. It'll be the original elevations. So these are the existing elevations. This matches the condition in the field. As you can see, some areas we actually expose some cove lap siding. Some areas are, and typically those are covered over with not shiplap, but shakes, wooden shakes that have been painted quite a bit. There's also a bunch of areas that have been carved out for interior partitions and added drywall and such. Odd openings where it made it work for the other additions to the house over time. Go to the next page. We'll show you the portions of the house that we're demoing. So obviously we're making some new openings to create openings for some light into the house. And taking off that front porch on the south elevation. If you go to the next one, it's going to show the final elevation, and I believe we had some comments about, oh, sorry, this is the new plan. Effectively maintains the L-shaped character of the original house. It's in the report. Have a wooden, the middle plan, so the plan all the way furthest to the right is the cellar or the basement. The middle plan, or the next to it to the left, is the first floor plan. We're adding the porch to it. And then on the back, we're having like a little at-grade patio off the back side. Go to the next page and you'll have the elevations. And I believe there were some comments previously about the size of the windows. And I just wanted to reiterate, we're replacing the windows. They're single glazed windows. We're replacing those windows with a matching size window, a custom matching size window to match the sizes that we currently have in the locations we currently have and where it was previously incorporated into the other rest of the house. We've added windows to provide a kind of a balanced elevation. We had some comments that the windows were different in size, but all the windows per floor are actually consistent throughout the house. And then roofing wise, we discovered that actually embossed metal roofing that's exposed when they did the demolition work, and we proposed to retain that as well. The shiplap siding, we have a detail of where we'd be replacing it. We'd probably be replacing most of it from the damage over the age with a matching product that's by Boral, which is kind of inert, kind of rot resistant material that paints just like wood without the rot. Is there any questions?
No, this being a workshop, there's no need for us to have the public input on this, so I'll go right to members of the board, and I guess we'll continue the roll call. Ms. Aubrey?
I have no comment to make. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Daniel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to see that this house is going to be returning to a semblance of its former glory. That's a positive thing to see. I think we were very optimistic about that when this proposal initially came to us. Some things that obviously when this does come for application that we'll want to see are obviously information on the materials and all those specs and everything like that, particularly the replacement materials. You mentioned that the existing windows are being replaced. Are these the original windows or are these replacements for originals that you're taking out and replacing?
They are replacements for originals. So effectively, we take the single glazed windows that are there and replacing them with a matching modern window with similar button bars and divisions of lights.
I was trying to understand if we were dealing with any original windows from the house or if these are replacements upon replacements.
There may be one or two. I honestly have to go back to check to see if it's tellable based on the glass. Much of it has been replaced over time, but we had the intention to replace them, so we didn't actually pay that close attention to that.
I mean, obviously, from a preservation perspective, it would be my desire that if there were original fabric, we try to keep it as best you could, recognizing that there are constraints on that depending upon what one, if it is original fabric or if we're dealing with other replacement windows.
Well, we can certainly go and ascertain that information from the house itself.
Mr. Daniel, Kayvon Jabori here, with all due respect. It is my strong belief that none of the windows in that historic house are the original windows. I have had extensive conversations with the owner. The way the paint is on them, the way they look, the way the glass is, it does not appear that the windows are the original historic windows, but of course, ACG is going to verify that.
That would be very appreciated.
Sure, no problem.
That's all I've got at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Wong?
Yes, I like how it's the window size, and then they kind of try to get them all organized on both sides. I do not have a comment. However, I do have a question. May I know the reason of take out that brick chimney?
When we visited, there was some concern, one of the partners and I, over the foundations for that. It appeared to kind of be poured on a mud slab and not really that structural. We did not have a structural engineer to evaluate that, nor did we do excavation work, but it just, from appearance wise, appeared that it was kind of poured haphazardly. The original chimney, as you can see from the original photograph, is actually inboard of the exterior wall. So that was, for some reason, altered at some point. So if you went back to the original, the first slide here.
I see. I don't have a further question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kalinsky.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burns. With respect to the chimney, is that the same elevation that's shown on that's currently up on the screen off of Nicole's computer?
Yes.
The east elevation. So originally it was inboard.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
yeah, I wouldn't typically.
As far as we can tell, in 1918, which is the oldest photograph of the property. So I'm assuming that would be the oldest or the most correct to the house.
Okay. Pardon me a second while I'm kind of running through my separate elevations here on my computer. Okay, so I do, I am noticing that you have what appears to be vents, gable end vents. They're not called out on your.
There is one set of vents. I guess that's the west side.
Okay. All right.
We just retained it. We retained it. I'm assuming when we actually insulate it, those will probably become closed off.
Okay, and I apologize. I wasn't zoomed in enough on my computer. The east side, as you get to the top of the gable, the lines were reading as if they were tightly spaced, which would generally indicate a gable end vent, but not the case. Okay, so I think what we originally charged Mr. Jabori with, I think he's done an excellent job. Very glad that he brought you in because you've done really good work here. I understand the balance between preservation and restoration of this house. If there were a way to determine if any of the original windows remained, any cylinder glass or any sashes, it could be salvaged and perhaps put in on. If you had 3 of each window or 3 and 2, and you were able to restore those sashes and those windows on one particular elevation, that as a kind of nod to the past of the house, I think that would be great, though I understand that, what few good pieces of glass and what few sashes remain may not be enough to do that. But if there were one or two that you could pull together and use on the house, love to see that. Other than that, I think this is pretty well put together. Perhaps just a little bit more descriptive detail on some of the finishes, such as corner boards, etc. Would be great to see when you submit it for approval. So with that, I think good job. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. Ms. Murray.
I feel that I need a correction. It's pronounced Maple, and it's misspelled on the first slide. I too am very, very happy with the progress that you all have made with this. It's definitely it's very pleasing to me. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Okay, Ms. Watkins, I don't see her on the list, so she's probably not still with us. Mr. Plumpy?
No comment. I think it's basically a great job you guys have done. So continue on the progress. Look forward to trying to prove this.
Okay, Mr. Zellman?
No comments, thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of comments. Thank you, Mr. Nottingham. I was the person who asked the question about the size of the windows in the May comments, and you responded to that. I appreciate it. I still remain a little concerned about if, Nicole, you could put up the proposed north elevation. It should be the last sheet in the set. Right. In that north elevation, the second story windows in particular strike me as almost postmodern in appearance. They seem overscaled with relation to the size of that end wall of that addition. And I was wondering, if you go up 2 slides, I guess it is, what would that be, slide 2? Yeah, slide 2, okay. You can see on the second floor, there is what I assume was formerly an interior wood door, but that made me wonder whether or not there are any framing evidence within that wall of windows ever being in that wall.
I cannot speak to that. We did not do any destructive interior analysis of the property. It is interesting, though, that when they strip the drywall off, the Dutch or the cove lap siding that's underneath the remainder of the shake siding that was applied over it is still there and still courses around the corner. So that would lend some credence that there maybe was no openings there, but without probably tearing all the interior drywall or plaster off the house, I couldn't tell any evidence from the outside anyway.
Okay, thank you. And I had one last comment and a suggestion to make. In the sample trim piece that you gave to us, the stock size trim, the 1x trim, I noted that the siding you had selected was smooth, and I note that the trim is labeled as you can either use the wood grain side or the smooth side. Please use the smooth side to match the siding. And please make that part of your spec, because I've seen it in, people say, oh yeah, we'll do that. And then you see the finished product and it's all on with the artificial wood graining side exposed. So please use smooth siding, smooth trim material to match the smooth surface of the proposed siding. Those are my only comments. I've run through the whole roll call of the members of the board. Would someone like to make a motion? No, we don't need a motion. Workshop, okay. Mr. Jabouri, Mr. Nottingham, do you have any further questions for us based on the feedback you've received today?
Based on your comment, Mr. Burns, would you be looking I mean, looking to change those windows. I mean, if we did that, then there's other windows also in the same room that would also be affected.
My question was, and you've already answered my question was, what was the basis for putting windows of that size in that location? And the simple answer was, we matched the width of the other windows in the main block of the house.
Sure.
That answered my question. And then my follow-up question was, had you discovered any physical evidence embedded in the wall that would have indicated windows being there or windows of a different size being there? And what you said was that based on what you have seen of the siding in that area, you believe that there may have never been windows, in which case these are simply a new feature. And my only question was the size of those windows in proportion to the size of the end of the addition seemed slightly postmodern looking. It's slightly overscale. So I was just trying to get to what the rationale was for selecting those particular windows in that particular size. I am satisfied with what you have presented, and I'm satisfied with the answers you've given.
Okay.
So I'm not asking you to change. I just wanted to understand the basis for why those windows in that location.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your time on this. We are going to address your concerns and hopefully get back to you in the following month's meeting for an action if possible.
Okay, we appreciate you participating tonight. And if you have any comments on how we might improve an electronic meeting, certainly please share them with Laura, and we'll take them into account for the next month's meeting. We are learning tonight as you are. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.
Okay. Now, the next three workshop items involve the Laurel Hill Adaptive Use Area, and this is an area that involves potential use of the historic preservation.
Don, I thought we had one more before that.
Oh, we did?
Yes, we have Harrison House.
Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Thank you, Mr. Daniel, for correcting me. Okay, next workshop. I'm too eager to get through the agenda here. The next workshop item is ARB 20-CTV-02, proposal for architectural modification to the Harrison House, located at 13930 Braddock Road, Centerville, Virginia, tax map 54-4, double paren 1, lot 41. And this is in the Sully District. Ms. Danielle Quinn and Mr. Mark Icio, please correct me if I'm wrong about the pronunciation, are representing the application tonight. And Nicole, thank you for already getting the project presentation up, and I will turn the agenda to them.
All right, Ms. Quinn and Mr. Dicio, you have been made panelists. Let me know if you both can hear me, and if you could speak, that'd be great. All right, Ms. Quinn, I see you. I can hear you. Have a mute or unmute button for you. All right, Danielle, would you mind trying to speak again? Yeah, I still can't hear you. Okay, let's try the settings, audio settings on your
You don't have any, Danielle, you don't have any other applications open that might be trying to use your microphone?
all right. Mr. Dicio, are you able to speak? And Danielle, there's that phone number you can actually call in for audio. I'll send it to you in the chat.
I think I got it fixed. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, Danielle, whenever, and Mr. Dicio, whenever you're ready.
I'm not sure if Mr. Dicio is unmuted or if he can talk yet, because he just texted me that he's not able to get it to work.
See him here. He is a presenter. Annotate, don't see. Let me see if I put him back to an attendee and pull him back to that helps sometimes. Okay, let's see if that works. All right, I tried to do it again and I'm not having any luck. So
We
I can put the number in the chat and he can call in for discussion.
Okay.
That's okay. Let me just put the number in the chat real quick for the discussion.
I can take care of that, Laura, if you would like.
Okay, I've got it right here. I've had it up the whole time because I've been.
All right.
Thank you, Kira.
No problem.
And we can go ahead and get started while we wait for him to call in.
Okay, it's all set. Ms. Quinn, whenever you're ready.
Sure, thank you. So we're before the board today for a proposal on the Harrison House. Right now, the house is in a state of disrepair. So what we are looking to do is to replace the back deck on the house and anchor in the chimney that's starting to tilt and pull away from the house. We were before the board late last year with plans to redo the entire house, which the board turned down. So at this point, we're looking just to do some renovations to the house. So if you could pull up our exhibit 4.
Is it in this presentation?
It is.
Okay. Here?
Keep going.
Keep going. Sorry, one second, my scroll bar.
This is it. And if you could give me 1 second, Mr. DC is struggling to call in.
Let me see if I can rotate this while you're doing that.
Hey, Nicole, you might want to try Shift Control minus.
All right, let me try that. No, that did not work.
Actually, Steve, that worked for me. Shift Control minus. Thank you.
Might be just because I'm in this app.
Yeah.
You're sharing the screen. Maybe if you get out, rotate it, and then come back into share screen.
Yeah, I'll try that. Give me one. It worked.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalinsky.
No problem.
So if we could scroll to the next page, that we'll get started on the foundation that the rear deck sits above. So as you can see from these photos on the left-hand side of the screen, the main joists that support the deck are starting to rot and fall apart. Right now, as the deck sits, you're not able to walk on it. It's structurally unsound and eventually will collapse. So what we're looking to do is remove these joists as well as the deck above it, which is on the next page, and replace it with similar materials that are already there. So potentially using reclaimed woods and painting them white and replacing all of the pickets with exactly the same pickets that are there currently. That way we have an identical deck to preserve the integrity and historic nature of the house, but having something secure that people can walk on. And then if you move on to the next page, this is a better overview of the back deck, as you can see in the right-hand side of the photos. And you can see how the overhang on the deck is starting to buckle in the middle, and the deck is in complete disrepair. Then on the left-hand side of the page, as you can see, the chimney is starting to pull away from the house. One of the county inspectors looked at the house and said that they thought the chimney was pulling away, whereas when our architect looked at it, they believe that the house is actually pulling away from the chimney, and the chimney is structurally sound. So we'll need to have somebody come in, but what the idea is to go in through the inside of the house and anchor the chimney and the house back together so that it becomes one unit again and becomes usable. We're hoping that we can do this just using ties on the inside of the house and anchoring it, as opposed to having to dismantle the chimney and rebuild it. In the event that we have to rebuild the chimney, we'll preserve as many of the stones as possible and use those in remaking it. If that's not possible, we'll get similarly sized stones in a similar color and use those. Those are the two main items at this time that we're looking to replace on the house.
This is Laura. Hi, how are you? I know, I apologize. Okay, so what's going on?
Laura, you need to mute yourself.
Okay, we're still trying to get Mr. DCO, I assume.
Yes.
One question I have, in the workshop description, it says replace the rear deck of the house and replace the chimney. But your drawings have included the porch on the front side as well. Is that to be included in the work, or is that just there for illustrative purposes?
I'm not sure why our architect put the front side of the house in there. That one does not need to be redone at this time. We will be putting a fresh coat of paint on it and fixing the posts that are missing on the left-hand side of it. But the back deck and the chimney are the two main items that will require zoning permits.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, members of the board, I'm going to run through the roll call again and see if you have questions or comments for the presentation. Ms. Aubrey?
I was pleased when to hear that they are planning this work, because I went on the inspection of the property a year or so ago, and it's a very interesting house, and it is definitely in need of repair. So I'm very happy for their proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Daniel?
Thank you for the applicant bringing this in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So no, I'm also happy to see this work taking place. I was looking at the chimney. I think that's a fine approach in applying Secretary of Interior standards to approach the chimney first, trying to resecure and see if you can just make it one. I'm happy to hear you went at it with your own folks to see if that actually was the case. And if not, I agree it's probably the next best option is to.
At this point, they're done, so let me hear the comments. Thank you. Well, I'm on the phone.
We can just hear you now, sir.
All right, good. Thank you. Good evening.
Glad to have you.
Well, the house was built in 1840. Apparently, my computer skills predated it.
Well, we're glad you could finally join us, though.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Decio, this is John Burns. To keep you up to speed on all of this.
I was able to actually hear and follow along, sir.
Okay, so you've heard what's going on. Okay, good. Just you've been mute, that's all. Okay, I'll continue our roll call. Ms. Huang?
Burns, could I finish?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
You weren't finished, sorry.
No, but it's very minor again as well. I'm happy to see about the porch repairs as well. And thankfully with porch repair and replacement, obviously replicating materials within kind is what I'd be looking for, since a lot of this appears to be wood rot and material degradation. So if you are able to salvage, that's great. If not, they seem fairly easy to replicate when it comes to spindles and things like that. So again, it seems like a good proposal. There you go. I'm done, Mr. Burns.
Thank you. Ms. Huang?
I have no comments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kalinsky?
Okay, my comments, Mr. Burns, are, I think, a matter of semantics. When I go through the drawings and look at the different photographs and callouts, everything is installed similar. The word similar is very vague in the construction world. I think we need to consider using a different term or determining which areas where similar is good enough. But something to match or some wording that's less vague, I think, is important. And in some of these cases, I think actual specifications can be called out. Types of wood, et cetera, can be called out to indicate what type of work needs to be done and what sort of materials need to be used at that point. It just seems almost as though most every detail just says similar, replaced with similar. So
Now that Mr. Decio is on the call, he actually has a material list with him that I did not have in front of me, so he may be able to elaborate a bit more upon which materials will be used.
Right. So, sir, I don't know if you can hear me or not. The word similar really, we're really more looking towards replicate. In other words, if we can use existing materials, obviously we will. If not, we'll replace them with what they were. For example, on the front porch rail, we're going to replace it with pressure treated 2x6, and all balusters will be reinstalled. Missing balusters will be replaced with equal, which they'll make in a custom shop. So the design is to trade an apple for an apple, not an apple for an orange.
okay, it's just that the semantics of it concern me, only because my experience is whenever I've used the word similar on a set of drawings, it's never turned out to be similar.
Well, the alternative, sir, other than the custom shop, was to remove all the rails and replace them with 5-pon. Actually, they're called Balfour balusters with new 5-pon top rail and bottom rail. But obviously the intent is to maximize or replicate the original home, and that's why we're going to redo the balusters in a custom mill shop.
Well, and I certainly appreciate that attention to detail.
Could the phrase "in kind" be used instead?
I don't know, to go back with the word similar, maybe I've been a lawyer too long, but in kind just makes me nervous. I'm not sure what that is. I think what we're trying to do is literally replace it with what it's being replaced with.
Well, this is Mr. Daniel. The phrase "in kind" I'm pulling from the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Preservation, which is a common term used in those guidelines for historic properties. I think we're all getting at the same point, and I think you're pointing out that that's the intent is to replace like with like. If the material can't be salvaged, you're going to use wood, you're going to use metal where metal is used.
So under that definition, in kind would be acceptable.
Okay. And my concern is you hand this to a subcontractor, somebody who's hired to do the work, and they hand it off to their supplier, their material supplier, and they end up getting the cheapest substitute possible to go in there. So we're just trying to avoid confusion and mistakes and kind of dropping of the ball down the line.
Mr. Klinsky, thank you. I will advise you that the owner is a contractor, fabricator, and has a mill shop. So the intent at this point is to do it all in-house.
Okay, well, that's encouraging to hear. That's wonderful. Okay, that is my concern. Other than that, I don't have anything else to add.
Thank you, Mr. Klinsky. Ms. Murray?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Mr. Plumpke?
No, everything's good. Very good comments, y'all. So I'm fine.
Okay. Mr. Zellman?
No additional comments, thanks.
Okay, I'll add my comments at the end. I'm very pleased. I thank you for taking steps to get this house back in improved condition, and I commend you for that. I do share the concerns that Mr. Klinsky and Mr. Daniel expressed about the terminology of describing things. To get the best result, you have to get the best description of what you want to accomplish. And so I think you should consider the wording and all of that. And I'm sure if you talk to the owner who's experienced with woodworking, he will also understand that as well. Those are the only comments that I have. So do you have any comments or questions for members of the board?
On behalf of myself and McQuinn, we do not.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating in this virtual meeting, and we look forward to this coming back as an action item.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, board members. Have a safe day.
Okay. Okay. Now we get to the three items I attempted to introduce a little bit ago, and that is three workshop items in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse area, and specifically in the former Lorton Correctional Complex. These are projects for which I need to recuse myself. And Mr. Plumpy, do you need to recuse yourself on these three as well?
Yes, I do as well. Thank you.
You do, okay. Mr. Daniel, are you able to take the chair for this particular section?
I am able to take the digital gavel for these.
Okay, so what I will do, and Mr. Plumpy, I think you can also do, is I will turn off my camera, and Nicole, if you can mute us both, and when it is time for us to return to the meeting, unmute us and call us back in. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, Laura, I can't do any muting when I'm sharing my screen, so Laura.
Okay, then Laura will have to do that.
Yes, what did you say, John? Sorry, I was adding people. To mute you while you're gone and then unmute you.
Unmute me and call me.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay. And I can do that.
Thanks, John.
All right, well, Laura, I assume you're working on adding on our speakers for these three items. The first one on our agenda is for item ARB 20-LOR04, proposal for Phase 2C site plan improvements for parking. On here, we have it being presented by Mr. Jim Perry of Elm Street. Mr. Perry, are you with us? Okay. Laura, is there someone different than Mr. Perry who's presenting, or?
No, Jim's supposed to be Mr. Perry. I just muted you and unmuted you. Try to go to the audio settings at the bottom, and there's a speaker microphone part. That seems to be the hiccup for most people. For whatever reason, it's the type of, there's three dots at the bottom of the screen. You click on it, it talks about your audio, and then you can do a drop down for like speakers with headphones or Dell. That seems to be the usual. I have a Dell, but it'll say what type, and see if that helps. Can anybody else from that group? I just added you all in. Can anybody else?
Yes, we're on.
Jim, I think I hear you.
Aaron Vincent is on. I don't know if you can hear me.
This is Frank Watkins.
I can hear you, Mr. Watkins.
Mr. Vincent, we can hear you as well.
And we can hear you.
I'm looking for Jim. Mr. Kazak, I just took you off mute. You were there.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. And then Mr. Nick Kasaki, I think it is.
Yep, I'm here.
I'm sorry about that if I butchered your name. And then
That's
Corey
okay.
Bowers, are you there as well?
I'm here.
Okay, so it's just Jim. Those people that I just talked to you, if you could mute your mics again for me, that'd be great, because now you have the ability to do it yourself. Jim, I'm going to take you off of attendee and try to put you back on and see if we can get you back going. Jim. Okay. Make panelist. Jim, are you there now?
No one seems to hear him at this point.
No, not.
Jim, I might suggest that you use the number that Laura put in the chat with the access code. If we can't get the sound issue resolved, because you can also call into the meeting via that, correct, Laura?
Yes. I tested it, so I know it works.
Thank you, everybody, as John's mentioned before, for bearing with these technological challenges that we're facing in this interesting time we live in.
We tried it earlier this week and Jim was just fine, so.
Just a suggestion, maybe check the connect to audio in the bottom left-hand corner of the WebEx screen. There may, if we have not yet connected, there may be a connect to audio button that will allow Jim to go and either do it via computer or dial in.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate any tips and tricks we can. Oh yes, you can hit call in or call me.
I'm on the phone now. Can anyone hear me?
Oh, hey, Jim. Yeah.
There we go. Sure. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me through my computer now?
I believe so.
Great, thank you. So sorry about the technical difficulties. This is Jim Perry with Elm Street Development. We have a team to present to you tonight, but I was going to start us off. And I'll just start by saying that we are very excited to be here tonight to present the commercial portion of the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Project to you. This retail center is obviously very important to us as the developer of this project, but it's also a very important element to our Lorton community, our friends and neighbors. Without a doubt, we get more questions and more interest in this retail development than any other portion of this project. So we are very excited to get started with you tonight. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Keep going, one more. One more. So this is a familiar image. This is our illustrative site plan that you've seen many times. Just for orientation, I've highlighted in red circles the three components we're presenting this evening. These are the site plan improvements that are outside the prison wall, between the prison wall and Silverberg Road. Some additional parking improvements around the new retail building on the left-hand side, as well as the architecture for those two buildings that are circled in kind of a dark purple there. So next slide, please. Next. So again, just by way of orientation, this gives you just in kind of color format. The green are existing site plan improvements that are already constructed. The yellow are site plan improvements that have already been approved by the ARB and by the county. And we expect to commence construction of those improvements in the near term, probably in the next couple of weeks. And then the orange are the portions that we're here to present to you this evening. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the site plan layout, including the footprints for the 2 new buildings and the lighting layout. All the proposed improvements are generally consistent with previous approvals. We are seeking to build a little closer to the prison walls with our Lidl store. We're showing on this drawing that we have a 12-foot setback between the Lidl building and the north prison wall. And we have a 14.5-foot setback between the Lidl building and the the wall to the east. Those setbacks were 18 feet previously, so we are approaching a little bit closer. But I think as we go through our presentation tonight, you'll see that with the different architecture, we believe that a little bit closer encroachment is appropriate. And we'll have a lot more material to show you about that a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. This slide shows you the grading and the proposed landscaping. At our previous meeting, there was some discussion or concern about the grading of the parking lot outside the wall. And the desire, I think, was to try to drop that down a little bit. We were able to accomplish that so that the middle of that parking lot is probably 2 to 3 feet below the existing topography. So just to illustrate that, if you start at the 230 contour, kind of at the top of the screen below the word Silverberg Road, you can see that we pull that back into the site. It crosses the 32 contour and continues on to about a 33. So right in the middle there is about a 3-foot cut before we tie back into existing at the prison wall. The benefit of that, obviously, is by lowering those new improvements, it improves the view of the prison historic facilities as you drive by on Silverberg Road. Next slide. This is just a blow up of that parking lot area and the proposed BMPs. Next slide. This is the landscape schedule that you very similar things you've seen before. And then I'll just kind of go quickly through the next few slides. We're giving you examples of the species that we're proposing to plant. Next. Next slide. Next. And this is the lighting detail that we're proposing, and it is consistent with the other lighting that's been installed in this project in the redevelopment areas. Next. So with that, I will turn it over to some of our representatives from Liitle for the next part of our presentation.
Jim, thank you. My name is Nick Casey. I'm the Director of Real Estate for Liitle.
Sorry, I wanted to suggest that if this is the next item, perhaps we should, do you want to talk about each one independently, or do you want to do them all as a whole?
It's really your choice, Chris.
I would look for some input from the board members. In my mind, it would seem better to hit these all one at a time, since each one has, we don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole for each one and end up not paying our attention, since each one's an individual component. I'd look for any other observations.
The only thing I would add is that there's quite a bit of material at the end of our presentation that you haven't seen before, which is site sections and some 3D images from a site model. So we kind of started big picture by looking at the site plan. So the idea was to start site plan, kind of big picture, then show you the architecture, very specific stuff, and then close with site sections and the 3D modeling to try to return it back to the kind of the big picture. So just want you to know that.
That seems agreeable to me. I think then what we'll do once you've finished is we'll talk about each one independently, because I imagine each of these are going to be their own submissions in the future.
Correct. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, did not mean to interrupt. Please proceed.
No worries. Again, my name is Nick Casey, Director of Real Estate for Liitle. Happy to be here. Thank you to the ARB, and Jim, thank you for selecting us as your grocer partner. We're happy to be here. On my team, Tori Bowers, Development Manager for our office, and Michael Kazak from Miller Architecture. I may ask them to chime in from time to time. So a little bit about us. We have one store open in Fairfax County, just opened in Springfield a couple months ago, and we have 12 more in development. So we're pretty excited about that. But the first few slides that we're going to go through right now are going to be our elevations, and then I'll dive deeper into the design we've selected. So the first one here, you'll see the historical design, the previous design, and our current design. Next slide, please. This just shows an overlay at the top of our current middle design overlaid on the historical building. Next slide, please. This is showing the south elevation of the property. Next slide, please. Showing the east elevation of the property. Next slide, please. And this is showing the west elevation from the main shopping center parking lot, and then the east elevation on the bottom. I'll start talking into some of our design materials here. It was our design concept to this doesn't match anything we've done in the state of Virginia to date. So this is definitely a pioneering project, and we're excited to do it here. And we're looking for something where contemporary met industrial, and you'll see that we tried to use as much as possible a dramatic amount of glass to really allow for a maximize the natural light that gets onto our sales floor, but also activate the rest of the shopping center and other and the other community behind. We also added a large 81-foot long canopy with some metal accents that is not prototypical for us. So we thought this is a nice added feature for this property. The design finishes itself, you can see, are predominantly brick, white brick with gray charcoal accent brick. We wanted to throw in some reclaimed wood faux panels that you see in several areas. And then we're doing a stone veneer along the bottom of the building. And we're trimming out and coping with metals throughout. And you'll see our loading dock is going to be shielded for privacy and for aesthetics, also with a garage door, which is not prototypical to us. Next slide, please. And this is our side elevation, where again the darker toned brick is enhanced a little more further as you drive up the side drive aisle. Next, please. All right, getting into our high resolution renderings. This is our front elevation again and how we anticipate activating the center. Next slide, please. Here's our elevation as you come in the main entrance. You can see the guard tower and the prison wall as is. See the immense amount of glass they're adding. We'll also have glass on glass windows on the side to bring in some more natural light. Next slide, please. Again, here's the, I guess, the west elevation or south elevation, where you can see that we have our loading dock is going to be with a garage door that is going to added for privacy and aesthetics in the shopping center. Next slide, please. Here's our night view, how we're going to illuminate the storefront at night, and our interior of our store will also be quite bright, which should illuminate the parking lot. Next slide. I'll let the pictures speak for themselves. Next slide. All right, thank you very much for your time. Turn it over to Jim.
So Frank Watkins is our next presenter. The next set of architecture. This is the retail building on the western side, the left side, across the parking lot from the Lidl store.
Good evening. This is Frank Watkins. So this first slide shows the originally approved elevation relative to the currently proposed elevation. It shows that the massing of the building, the 2014 approved building and the current building are similar. In fact, the base height of the lower parapets is exactly the same. The height of the higher parapet on the new design is about 4 feet lower than the peaks of the original design. It's kind of an understated contemporary character, which we think does not compete with the existing architecture. You can see the historic building up above, but we're using high quality materials, predominantly brick. We'll talk more about the specific details, but predominantly brick. to match the brick that's being proposed for the food store. Next slide. This shows, again, a silhouette of the proposed building relative to the existing building to show that the massing of that makes it continue to be subordinate to the existing historic architecture. Next slide. Shows the materials. The brick is the same white brick as proposed for the food store. We have split face CMU, which is used on the rear of the building only. The fiber cement shiplapping is in that center feature. We have metal trim and contemporary fixtures, and then the metal canopy that we're using is going to be similar in terms of material and color to the canopies that are used on the historic buildings now. Next slide. Distribution of the materials shows that the white brick, as you can see in the fronts and the sides, the fiber cement lap siding goes on that central feature, as well as the accent verticals on the side of the building. The rear is where the split face block will be used. Next slide. This shows the footprint. The footprint is shallower than what was originally approved, which gives us the advantage of having a deeper sidewalk. So the curb footprint is pretty much the same, but now we have a nice 20-foot wide sidewalk in front of the building to allow for some outside seating. This is giving a view of the building. It would be right about from where you enter through the opening in the historic wall. So looking, this is looking southbound at the building. And then looking in the other direction as if you're standing in front of the historic buildings. We've cut 3 sections through the site. Sections A and B begin at the intersection of Silverbrook and White Spruce Way. The first section A will cut through towards the Lytle store, the food store. Section B goes down to the retail, and then we'll look at a section cutting through both buildings on the site. So next slide. Top is the section A, which is from the intersection cut through the food store. Below that, you can see a companion view of what that would look like from that same view. Section B looks more towards the retail building. And again, you get the what it would look like in terms of the 3D view. You can see that the retail building, the rooftop units can't be seen. They are modeled in there, but they can't be seen. You do see one peeking over the top of the food store. That particular rooftop unit is approximately where it will be, approximately as tall as it will be. But we think it's important just to recognize that it's 400 feet away from the intersection. You really are going to have to focus to see it. We don't show any trees in this view, and there are trees that help. And we are reluctant to raise the parapet wall to screen that because the mass of the building gets larger for such a small improvement. Next slide. This is the site sections cutting through the building, so it's across the parking lot. One looking from the retail to the food store, the other looking from the food store towards the retail with the companion views. You can see that in both cases, the tower and the walls are still dominant, and that all the rooftop units are screened from the interior. Next. This is a view coming in off of White Spruce Way, looking towards the retail building and the west entrance through the wall. Again, you can see that the dominance of the view is the historic wall and the tower. Next slide. This is just taken a little bit further back, but now you can also see to the right through the opening, which goes towards over by the food store, and you can see the historic buildings beyond there. Next. This is from down out on White Spruce Way, looking towards the building. You can see the slope of the food store above the historic wall, but it tapers down as it gets towards the tower, which we think helps increase the impact of the tower and starts to reduce the impact of the mass behind the wall. Next. This is a view from Silverbrook looking up towards the tower. You can see the food store just to the right of the tower, but because it slopes down, you don't see the rear of the building at all from there. So it's from the backside can't be seen. Next slide. we did in this slide is we took, that's correct, next slide, that we imposed into the perspective that we've done recently, the building that was originally approved. So what you see there is what would be the mansards on the roof of the original design. So I just think it's important to look at the comparison of those two views and how the sloping of the food store impacts it. So the gray that you see there would actually be the sloped mansard roofs on the originally proposed design. Next. This is looking up the rear entrance into the project. You're looking at the rear back corner of the loading dock of the food store, which does have an enclosed area, so the truck will be concealed. The previous view, you would actually be looking into the back of the center and potentially at the truck at the loading dock. Also, that one more comment on that, you won't see that because of the trees, the stands of trees, both the existing and the new trees that'll be between it and Saddlebrook, you won't be able to see it at all. Although from this actual is the only view you'll be able to see that. Next. This is a view again from the front of the project looking towards the food store. I just wanted to highlight how the character of the architecture intentionally is different from the historic building. That was the direction that we went with the state historic people, so that it's clearly not mimicking the existing architecture, which is more like what the original approved scheme had done. It also shows that the tapering of the roof starts to reduce the impact of that mass on the wall and in particular on the tower. And then next slide. Again, we imposed into the same model the approved design for the food store that shows that massing of the roof relative to the wall and the tower, as well as the character of the original approved design and how it blends so much with the historic building that the differentiation between the historic buildings and the proposed buildings is not as clear. And I believe that's it. Next slide, yeah. Jim?
So Chris, that's the presentation. I'm happy to go back and individual pieces if that would be best.
I think it would be best if we started with the parking. I think the grocery store and the retail commercial area are going to find themselves interlinked in some, but I think if we go through each one individually, I'll do what John or Mr. Burns did, and I'll call on each member. And I think if we start with the parking, I think that would be the best way to go for member comments. So going alphabetically, Miss Albury.
On the outside, you want me to just comment on the parking section?
I would entertain thoughts from all the members if you all want to talk about it all at once, or it's a lot of stuff to digest. So.
Well, it is. The parking area, I mean, I from the very beginning, I never really was satisfied with having any parking out there. So I do appreciate their sinking it, lowering the elevation to make it less obtrusive. I hope that by doing that, there's sufficient drainage so it does not become a swimming pool during the rain. The architecture of the new architecture, I will admit, I find somewhat jarring in the juxtaposition between the very modern architecture and the historic architecture. And that might be a good thing. Just take some getting used to, but I do feel it is so different. I'm not comfortable with it at this point in time. That's all I have to say.
All right. I will go on to Samantha, this one.
Hi. I'm wondering the parking count, because I know on the upper right corner, that little parking area, we have a little bit discussed last time in the meeting. It was not in the original approved site plan. So
no, it is. It's in. Yes.
Okay.
It was. It's been there always. We have just not gotten to this design level of approval.
I see. I keep having that reflection. My apology. So I wonder, is the current parking, the parking count is pretty much the same as the original approved?
Yes, it's a handful of spaces less than what was on the original drawing. We've lost a few spaces to dumpsters and handicap spaces and things like that, but it's within 5 or 6 spaces of the original approval.
I see. Got it. In terms of the building design, I found myself have a similar feeling with Michelle as well. I have a hard time to find my position with that design. That's what I have at the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Kalinsky.
All right, thank you, Mr. Daniels. With regards to the first item, the parking, I tend to mirror a lot of what Ms. Aubrey had mentioned. I would prefer that there wouldn't be parking out there, but I understand the need for it. So and realize that it's going to happen. I think sinking it down was a good maneuver to kind of shield it from view. I have that basic, say that same basic concern. So anything that could further obscure that parking, I'd be in support of. With regards to the two buildings, I'm going to start with the Lytle building. My initial response when I was looking through the presentation drawings is that the Lytle tends to be designed as kind of the architecture as a billboard, trying to promote its brand and say identify me. This is where you want to come. I think you're tucked into the wall there. That sort of large scale gesture really isn't needed here. I was a little bit mollified once I did see the renderings of it. It doesn't look as it's not screaming for attention as much as I initially thought when I saw the two dimensionals. But I do think based on kind of just the scale of the building, I understand, and I have no problem with it being tucked close to the walls. I do like the way the roof does taper down and how that kind of prevents the kind of bleed through over the walls. But I think the scale of the building combined with the bold gestures on the front, if they were somehow scaled down just a little, they weren't as bold, there wasn't as much, say, mixture between the materials, I think that would make for a better looking elevation, one that's more appropriate to this area. When you go to the retail building, I think that's much more successful. And part of that could be the fact that you do have the wider sidewalk. The building itself is smaller in scale. The number of materials, just say the use of materials, is more rhythmic and consistent. And with those historic buildings that have such strong rhythm to it, I think it just, with the diversity of materials, it catches that rhythm and helps tie it to that building a little bit better. So it's not as stark. So I'm definitely liking the retail, have my concerns about the Lytle building. Parking, prefer it wouldn't be there, but understand and would like to see it minimized. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Murray?
Ditto on the parking. I too would prefer it not exist, but the more you can minimize it, the better. I find the Lytle building just very, very jarring. And I'm not certain that it enhances the potential, the future historic district. I just find the materials jarring. And on both buildings, I don't understand why this cement wood. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Design-wise, I also like the commercial building better, but neither building seems to preserve or enhance the historic overlay district. That's it.
All right, Ms. Orr is not here. Ms. Knotkins is not back, I believe, correct?
I don't see her.
Okay. Mr. Plumpy is recused, so Mr. Zellman.
I don't think there's too much I can add that's not already been said. I think I pretty much concur with everybody else. I don't have as much of a problem with the parking, but I think we're going to probably have to have some more discussion about both the materials and the look of the Lytle building and the retail space.
All right, thank you, sir. And then I'll add my comments at the end. With the parking, I mean, it gets brought up every time we talk about this, Jim. So I know you hear this, all the same questions all the time. I've kind of come to the point that it is what it is, and I appreciate the efforts to sync it. And I think you've done what you can with that circumstance there. I'm going to have similar comments to, I think, my colleagues with regard to the Lytle building and the retail. I definitely think the retail was closer to the mark. I think, as Mr. Kalinsky said, there was a rhythm there. There were some callback themes to the historic buildings that were made reference in the presentation about how it connected back to the historic building and the fact that we're using some of that same metal. It feels like there's a little bit more communication between the two designs. I did go and Google Lytle and look at their different store designs that they have across the country. And so I do have to appreciate the fact that this design is very different from many of the ones I've seen that they've done elsewhere in their design. So I've got to give some credit where credit's due, that there does seem to be some variation done in this design. I guess my problem with it is it feels almost kind of Art Deco-y in a sense. There's some Art Deco theme, I feel like, to it, and I don't think that's intentional, but I think the jarringness of it comes a lot from some of the material choices. And while I appreciate the concept of wanting to separate itself from the original buildings and the fact that it's obviously reduced itself in size, I'm wondering if there's any more flexibility that exists here with materials, recognizing that there are that this is a brand we're talking about, where we could perhaps soften that a little bit more. In particularly the main facade, and this is my personal preference on it, I feel like perhaps looking at less wood, more metal, more glass would be, I think, more preferable to my perspective, because I think that feels more transparent than the materials that are here now. I mean, it does. I am agreeable about setting itself apart from it, but I'm trying to find that dialogue between the two, and I get the impression that the retail had to bounce off that when it was designing itself off this brand. That's all I kind of have to add at the moment. I figure you might have some questions back for us, so obviously please feel free to shoot them back to us.
I don't have any additional questions. I thought that was very good feedback. I appreciate that. We can certainly go back and work on those issues and see if we can, someone said, get closer to the mark. But that was a good start. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Daniels, can I offer one more bit of information?
Absolutely. Yes, please do, sir.
Having followed your lead in Googling some of the Lytle store designs, there are a lot of them that are like steel and glass pavilion types. I think those would come closer to fitting in here than, you know, what we see in the presentation. So I from a personal standpoint, wouldn't hesitate to go more in that steel and glass direction.
All right. Well, I hope that feedback is helpful. We knew this was going to be an interesting conversation when we got to them eventually one day, because these obviously are predominant features. But I think the takeaway is the commercial retail seems to be getting real close. The parking is the parking. And we've got some more discussions on the big box.
Yes. Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Again, as John has extended, we appreciate you accommodating these unique circumstances.
Great. Thank you.
Stay well. Laura, I assume you know how to retrieve our illustrious chair and Mr. Plumpy?
You just said to unmute him and call him, so we will try. John and Joe, we are finished with the Lorton items if you would like to return.
I am back.
Here, this is Joe Plumpy. I'm here.
All right, John, I pass back to you the digital gavel.
Okay. The next item we have tonight is a presentation. And that is a presentation on the Fairfax County Old Jail Roof Repair Project, brought to us by WRA Associates. So if you guys can unmute these folks, see what they have to say.
Okay, Mr. Hovey and Mr. Hassan, please let us know if you can speak.
Testing, can you hear me?
We can hear, yep, we can hear one person, I think. Is that you,
Okay.
Mr. Hovey?
Yes, this is Lonnie Hovey and my colleague, a structural engineer, Shiner Hassan. He is also attending in case there are any questions about structural work.
Mr. Hassan, I just unmuted you. Are you able to speak?
Can you hear me? This
Yes.
Shiner Hassan?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Fairfax County Architectural Review Board. My name is Lonnie Hovey, and I want to share with you a planned roof repair and restoration project that we have with Fairfax County. Next slide. This is our project team. I'm the preservation architect on the team. Shiner Hassan is our project structural engineer. Next slide. For those that may not be familiar with Whitman Requart and Associates, we're a large multidisciplinary architecture engineering firm founded in Baltimore in 1915. We have over 700 employees nationwide, and we have 7 offices throughout Virginia, and several of the staff working on the project are out of our Fairfax, Virginia office. We've been doing a number of historic preservation projects over the years. For the last 5 years, we've worked on more than 130 projects listed in National Register Historic Districts. Next slide. For those that may not be familiar with the old jail, it was constructed in 1885. The original portion faces north onto Main Street, and that's the photograph that you see on the screen there. It's a 2-story I-shaped brick building with a 1-story first floor porch. It's on the north side of the building that you see in the photo. And it's a brick construction building with a thick corbelled cornice and corbelled chimneys. There's cast iron roof cresting and finials at the ridge. It's a green slate roof. And what you can see in this photograph, a north central gable that's centered on the building over this gable of the porch. And there's 2 shingle types on the roof. There's a butt edge or square edge shingle, and then a fish scale type shingle that's in the middle of the roof that encircles the entire roof. And the building's been used for county agencies since 1956. Next slide, please. WRA did an assessment for Fairfax County of a number of all their public facilities, and we were then called back to help them with repairs to this roof. In our assessment, we had noted that there seemed to be a pretty good sway to the south side of the roof and a bowing to the south brick wall over the center portion of the addition. And you can see in the upper left photograph, the red arrow sort of accentuates the sag that's in that slate roof. These top 2 photographs show the cast iron cresting on the roof with the finials at each end. There's copper flashing at all the hips that is very wavy and loose, apparently. A lot of fasteners are missing. And the bottom right photograph shows a slight bulge to this wall at below the corbelled cornice. And there's a large crack on the inside at the attic. We have since done some exploratory probes inside the building after we submitted this presentation in April to the Arb. And we found that this low center addition has two doorways that were cut in this south brick wall into that center addition at some point in its history, and no lentils were put over those doorways. So we think that the roof thrust of the thrust of the rafters of the roof and these doorway openings are contributing to that bulge that's happening in that south wall. Next slide. I have a few slides to show some of the interior conditions of the attic. The ridge beam, our structural engineers found that the ridge beam is too thin and it's warping. There's also a lot of rot at the ends of this ridge beam. The two photographs on the right side are the same image, but one with flash, one without. So you can see the depth of the rot that's at the top, and then all the water stains that you can see with the flash on in the bottom image. Next slide. There's a lot of evidence of water staining throughout the attic from roof leaks. The roof that's on there now, we believe, is the original roof, but work was done in the 80s to replace all the gutters and downspouts and do some repairs to the roof and the flashing. In this one upper left photograph, that one bay, you can see the tide lines left and right of that rafter. That's evidence of the water soaking in through the roof, down the ridge and down the rafters. Next slide. This is showing on the back side of the south wall. So that spot where I pointed out there's a slight bulge on the outside, this is on the inside of that. And the right-hand photograph shows the crack that stair steps down through the brick that a past repair sort of parged over, didn't really repair it, just coated it with mortar to hide it, I guess. But our structural engineers found that that crack stair stepping through this parapet of the wall to the attic floor continues and just continues down to the second floor doorway and the first floor doorway cut in this wall. And it's a 3-wife thick wall, 3 layers of brick on the lower levels. And when you get to that corbel, it adds another 3 layers of brick outside of that main wall. So this crack is almost continuous through all 6 layers of the brick at the attic portion. Next slide. There are no rafter ties in the building or in the attic where the rafter bears on the masonry walls. So we think some of that bulging that's happening to the south wall is from the thrusting force of these rafters. The gable at the north side seems to work at resisting the force, so we don't have any displacement of the wall to the north of the attic, but it's all happening to the south where these where the weakest spot in the wall is, where those doorways were cut. Part of the remedy for our work is putting in new rafter ties to help reduce the thrust on that back wall. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. This shows another spot where we have some major cracking through the brick wall in the building. Next slide. Fairfax County has hired a contractor, HIT Contracting, to do the repairs and restoration of the roof. When we submitted this in April, HIT contractors were thinking that they would dismantle the south-facing slope of the roof to make the structural repairs and to repair the brick wall. Subsequent to that, and subsequent to our submitting this, the county met and the county has decided to restore the entire roof and not just remove the south slope, but to remove all the existing roof and restore the slates and the flashing. So the proposed repairs is to install a new ridge in the roof underside of the framing, repair any of the rotted rafters, install rafter ties, and remove mortar from the south parapet wall, that portion of the wall from the attic floor up, remove the mortar there and remove the mortar from the lower portion of the wall, and to not disassemble the entire wall, but the hope is by removing most of the mortar to be able to help push and remove the bulge that's happening by pushing the bricks back into place. There will be some brick that has to be removed on the attic side of the parapet. And our hope is to minimize as much of the disassembly as possible at that south wall. And then ultimately installing new slates to match the existing slates in color and shape and size and pattern, and install new ridge and hip flashing, take the original cast iron crusting that's on the roof, strip that and paint it with rust inhibited paint and reinstall that on the building, and the restoration of the roof and the masonry wall will be complete. Next slide. Thank you very much. We also submitted to you drawings and specifications that were our 50% submittal. And the drawings show all the details for the restoration of the roof. We were showing, as I said in these drawings, just removal and disassembly of the south portion, but the county wants to proceed with doing the whole roof now. So if you go back to the drawings, this is the specs. Go to this second or third sheet. So we've got the structural repairs showing some of the things that I showed you in the presentation. If you just sort of go through all these sets, here's that repair of the crack in the wall. Going to the next slide and the next. Here's the roof plan. We'll be calling for the protection of the porch roof and for the slate roofs of the middle section for all of the work. Go to the next slide. We've outlined all these elevations came from the 1980s set of drawings. And we'll be calling out for the full removal and replacement to match the existing slates and hip flashing. So are there any questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Hovey. Should we go through the members of the board in the alphabetical order again? Ms. Aubrey?
I have no comments to offer. I mean, I'm glad that they're going to take steps to repair the damage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Daniel?
I likewise have very few comments. It looks like a well put together project, and it looks to be well needed based on some of the imagery being shown.
Yes.
Samantha?
I have no comment. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Kolinsky?
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Thrilled to see this done, and looks like it's going to be done very well. I'm excited. The quality of drawings and the 50% set is excellent. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Murray?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Mr. Plumpy?
Nothing really to add. With your designs and everything is perfect. I think the contractor you selected hit. If they're still doing the project with the overall roof removal, will do an excellent job. We've worked with them before in several projects. Good choice.
Thank you.
Mr. Zellman?
I agree with everyone else. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I had a question or two. The first, I should say hello to Mr. Hovey. He and I have known each other for several decades.
Yes.
It's good to hear your voice, Lonnie.
Good to see you, Mr. Burns. Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions. One is I applaud your use of the word replace to match, which is we had a discussion earlier in our meeting tonight about the semantics of word choice in preservation projects. Regarding taking off and replacing the slate, invariably there's going to be some damage that's already occurred, some damage will happen in the field. Is there a source for replacement slate to match?
We don't have a source as of yet. We're hoping that the contractor will be able to get up to the roof and collect some samples, determine among the gray and the green, determine if the green is indeed the old original slates and all the gray slate that appears to be replacement are indeed replacement. And with the pandemic, access to the building has been off limits and travel has been off limits for much of our team. So the county, we haven't gotten up to the roof to do a normal investigation that we would do. So we've asked the contractors to do that as a pre-construction activity, and we're waiting to hear back from them if they will be able to do that in the coming weeks or so. So we don't have a source, but we have an idea of a couple of sources. If it is the gray slates, that's a readily available slate, whether it's fish scale pattern or square. And if it's a green slate, same thing. There's still a number of sources for the green slate.
Okay, thank you for that. And then you had mentioned early in your presentation and showed us a photograph of what you said was a thin, undersized ridge beam.
Yes.
And is that going to be replaced with a larger ridge beam, or will have something sistered into it? Well, how do you expect to approach that?
Shiner, can you take that question?
Yes. So the area that Lonnie was identifying was actually an area where there's well, the ridge beam actually consists of two boards adjacent to each other. And the area that Lonnie had described in his presentation showed where one of those boards had pretty much completely decayed. So we'll be specifying two new ridge boards adjacent to each other to replace the existing boards.
Okay, okay. And then a final question is there any proposal to add insulation into the roof, either on the deck or below the decking?
The attic is not an occupied space. They have some mechanical equipment up there now. And currently the entire attic floor has a loose fill insulation across the whole roof floor because of the occupied second floor offices. The county has not asked us to investigate adding any insulation within the roof assembly or adding any on the underside of the roof.
Okay, thank you. Those are the extent of the questions that I have. Do you have any questions for the board?
The only one I have is this is a 50% set of documents. We have changed the scope slightly to include removal and restoration of the entire roof. As a courtesy, would you like to see the 100% set of documents when we're finished?
Yes.
Okay, happy to
Please.
share them.
And you were undertaking this work for the Public Works?
Yes.
Who's your client? I guess that's what I'm asking.
This is for Fairfax County Facilities Maintenance Division.
Facilities, okay, okay. Yeah. Cool. Well, I thank you, gentlemen, very much for your presentation. Very informative, very well thought out, and clearly presented. So we're grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, have a good evening.
Thank you.
That concludes the workshop and presentation. All we have remaining on the agenda is board and staff items. The previous board meeting that we had, which is one that I did not attend, is from March. So our most recent set of meeting minutes to review was from March. Are there any comments or corrections on the March minutes? So do I need to go around, or is anybody who has a comment, please just speak up? Okay, hearing none. I would entertain and an action to approve the minutes as presented, and then authorization of payment to the recording secretary for the March 2020 minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zellman.
I would make a motion that we approve the March 2020 minutes and authorize payment to the recording secretary for March 2020.
Okay, is there a second?
Second for Mr. Daniel.
Second, Mr. Daniel. Okay. Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Next item was the treasurer's report.
I'm unmuted. Okay. Okay, for the end of June 1st balance was $15,939.85. And I will say, just for the record, that we approved to pay Mr. Ryan Johnson for the March 12th, 2020 meeting minutes in April, so he would be able to get paid. And we just kind of followed it up with this motion just now. So just wanted to make that clear for the minute.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, then discussion and update reports.
So a lot of, as you would probably expect, a lot of our work at the county either went full-fledged forward or went on hold. So I'm going to keep it brief for the update reports tonight. The Holland Hills update would be, we were about to go to the community meeting and present findings and discussions, and that has been delayed due to unable to meeting more than 10 people. I know that's supposed to be lifted tomorrow, but right now we're trying to obtain guidance from the county supervisor's office to see if we can move forward. And we'll be working with the Holland Hills work group on that to determine if that's something we would like to pursue. And then Nicole, so really, before I move on, everything on Holland Hills has basically been put on hold until we're able to meet with the work group first, but then also have a larger community meeting to discuss our findings that we were about to do in March, and that didn't happen. Nicole, I don't know, I kind of might blindside do this, but Nicole and Kira have been working on Homes Run Acres. And Nicole, if you want to comment on that work a little bit, I know you guys have been doing a lot of work in the last month.
Yeah, so luckily, because field work is pretty social distancing, Kira and I went out and did all the survey work on acres. Did about over just four days. And so it was great, had mostly good weather. And so now we're kind of going back and starting to do the research, the background, comparing what's changed since the National Register nomination, looking at permits. Kira did all that work, pulled all those permits for us yesterday, which is great. So then we're going to just kind of start doing our own internal evaluations like we did for Holland Hills. I spoke with the supervisor a few weeks ago, and she wants us to move forward as best we can, and she's fine with us convening a work group. So I'm just going to give it a week or so to see kind of how far we get with our analysis, to make sure we're far enough ahead that meeting with the work group makes sense. And so we'll do that. I'm hoping possibly late July would be our first meeting, or August, one of the two. And so if anybody would like to volunteer, you don't have to say it tonight, but we'd like to have a member again, or we had 2 members, I guess, from the ARB. So if you want to think about it, volunteer. Obviously, we'd love to have your expertise on the work group. So think about it, and we can probably I can probably send out an email in a week just to see if anybody's interested.
Okay, one question: how large? The number of houses? How large is Homes Run Acres?
About 350.
Okay.
Yeah, they only have 4 distinct house types. It's a little bit different than Holland Hills. So there's Most of the neighborhood was built as one, and there were two house types, and then there was a second edition, and then there's two different house types in that one. So there's not as many modifications or slight variations on a theme like there is in Holland Hills. So it was much easier to kind of get a grasp of what's changed and what hasn't changed, which helped with the speed of the field work.
Okay, thank you. So any correspondence or announcements?
Just wanted to thank you all for your help on the Section 106 that came fast and furious in the month of May. We had the Soapstone connector comments, and then we also had the Route 1 BRT comments, and I thank you all for your response and comments on that. That was kind of a really tight, weird deadline for all of us to have to meet virtually, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. The last three, administrative, old business, new business.
Well, John, I think at least we need to mention Laura's position change, which I think is really exciting, right? I mean, congratulations are in order.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been weird because I haven't been at work, so
I imagine so.
Not much has changed, but I will mention that the two changes was I was promoted to branch chief for so I'll have Heritage Resources, which is Denise, Nicole, Kira, and then my position, which is now vacant. And then I have also plan and development. So I'll do some comprehensive planning stuff as well. And then Denise Dressel also got promoted to a planner 3. So we had some exciting Heritage Resource news over the course of the pandemic here. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Congratulations. Let me ask you,
Laura, for remembering that. Appreciate that.
Have you replaced that?
I'm sorry. Someone about
For the ARB, are you still in the ARB or are you not hearing?
Well, there's no they have to open and advertise every position now, and there's no movement on my current or my old position. So for right now, we're just kind of Nicole, Denise, and I are going to tag team it, but I'll probably remain primary for the foreseeable future.
That's great. You're doing an excellent job.
I'm not going anywhere. So
no problem. You're doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any new business?
There was the only other thing was that there was a call for if we wanted to send any issues to the state legislature. There was a call due by August 3rd if the ARB wanted to produce any kind of initiative to the state legislator for the county to take. So just something to consider moving forward.
Members of the board, any new business you want to raise?
Yes. I'm going to wish all those who are fathers happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to all those fathers, and belated Happy Mother's Day to any mothers.
Mother's Days as well. Yes. Thank you.
There you go.
If I gave you virtual cupcakes, I would, but alas, we're not doing virtual cupcakes.
And probably the most unfortunate thing, the Sully Plantation Car Show on Father's Day is canceled.
It's virtual. I heard it's virtual. Did you hear that?
Really?
Yeah. So I saw that, and I saw that we got a virtual announcement. So I don't know how that's going to happen, but apparently it's still going to happen in some way, shape, or form.
I have to reconsider. Then I recant my statement. I apologize.
It's not the same, but it's still there.
Right on target.
Okay.
All right, all. I think.
All right. Well, then I will entertain a motion for adjournment then.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Mr. Daniel, a motion for adjournment is always in order. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Farewell.
Okay, we are adjourned. Laura and Nicole, thank you very much for your technical support.
Thank you.
Excellent job, you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
That wasn't too terrible.
Bye. Kira, were you able to screenshot the rest of the stuff? Can't hear you.
any comments besides like a little bit of technical difficulties, but I didn't think that that was, I assumed you didn't want me to take pictures
Okay.
of those.
Okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to make sure I'm keeping everything that we need to keep.
Yeah,
ready.
I didn't see any typed questions from the public.
Okay. Well, I think we'll talk Tuesday, kind of an update, debrief, that type of thing. And thanks for your help tonight. I appreciate it, even if it's just moral support.
Hey, I was keeping track to see if there were any comments. There weren't any.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. Sometimes in other meetings, there's going to be a lot more public comment. But anyway. All right, thanks, Claire. Have a good
This
night.
one we just weren't sure.
I know. You never know. And thanks, Amante, if you're still there. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Kara.